Well done is better than well said. You might have heard that famous saying from Benjamin Franklin, and it's one that reminds us of the importance of action over words. But what does it take exactly? Hearing and learning from others is important, but do we need more people driving impact as opposed to simply just talking about it? Today, we answer the big question: how do we turn words into action?
When we're solutions-oriented, when we're optimistic, when we think of the best of us rather than the worst of us, we can actually do good things.
Figure out the so what. What is it you're trying to solve for? Who are you trying to solve for as well?
The only thing that lies in the way of progress is acting, getting up and doing it.
If you find that common purpose, purpose really does overcome power.
Hello and welcome to the Green Room by Deloitte. I'm Annie Wong and we're back in the studio after a short break. I'm also joined today by my fabulous co-host, Lizzie.
Hey Annie.
So, in business, we explore ideas and we can talk about them. But how do we actually make them happen? How do we encourage people to take that next step? And how do we get that balance between talking and doing? Today, we're answering the big question: how do we turn words into action?
Indeed, and I am delighted to welcome two fantastic guests into the studio. Today we are joined by Paul Van Zyl, who is the co-founder and CEO of The Conduit. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you so much.
And also by Piumi Mitchell, who is Head of Social Impact Partnerships at Deloitte UK. Hi Piumi.
Hi there, nice to be here.
Lovely to see you. Let's get started and kick things off by perhaps getting under the skin a little bit of what it actually takes to progress ideas, which is what we're here to talk about today. Could you both start maybe by telling us a bit about yourselves, your careers, and also how they've helped to turn ideas into action? Paul, do you want to start?
I am a human rights lawyer by training. I cut my teeth in South Africa during the anti-apartheid struggle. And in there, that was, I think, a kind of quintessential example of turning ideas or words into action, because apartheid was a truly evil system and a crime against humanity. But you can describe it and do nothing about it, or you can try and change it. And I think one of the world's most successful movements for social change was the anti-apartheid movement. It sought to persuade a white minority government that its interests were better served, and white South Africans' interests were better served by having a true, genuine democracy. And the movement did everything it could, from isolating the country on sports, or through cultural boycotts, or through sanctions, or through mobilization on the streets, to try and say there ought to be change.
And that's driven you to continue sort of capitalizing on that experience and driving ideas, and with the rest of the work that you've done since then.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was something to be deduced from that moment was, or maybe two things. One is, I had the great privilege of working closely with Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu during the transition. And I've really come to believe that leadership matters, that you can have really fertile circumstances for social change, and you can have bad leaders or uninspiring leaders or self-interested leaders, and it can fail. And you can have rather difficult circumstances, and you can have inspiring, broad, remarkable leaders, and it makes a difference. So I think, studies in leadership, it would be a good place to start, looking at Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu. And then the second thing is optimism. And I think if you were to look at South Africa in the 1980s, you might say this place is going to be conflict-racked and a basket case, and people of different races are doomed to fight each other. And that rather difficult circumstance was turned around by people who said even the thorniest problems can be unpicked if you think about them systematically, and if you rise your eyes above the horizon and look at things in a more systematic way.
Unbelievable. Very interesting. Piumi, what about yourself in terms of your sort of career journey and how it's led you to do what you're doing today?
So I guess for me, I started my career here at Deloitte many, many moons ago in finance. I'm an auditor by trade, as it were. But I guess I'm a career switcher. So having worked in client service for a number of years, during lockdown, I had a bit of a light bulb moment to myself and kind of thought, actually what I really want to do is to kind of harness my commercial skills, relationship skills, all the rest of it, and actually point them in the direction of our social impact strategy here at the firm. So I kind of set about, I guess, turning that idea into an action in terms of how do you actually dip your toe into a whole new Paul? How do you kind of feel empowered to make that change, sort of personally, but also professionally, and have the kind of mindset shift to make that change? I was fortunate at the time that in January 2021, that was when the government introduced the social value model, which was all around really driving greater collaboration between private, public and third sector. And with that came an opportunity for Deloitte, from a kind of commercial and client imperative point of view, to really kind of think about our proposition in this space around social value, given that it kind of mattered from that perspective. I put my hand up to kind of basically set up our partnerships approach. So how do we collaborate with voluntary, community and social enterprise partners, as well as purpose-led SMEs, to really galvanise that superpower, as I see it, in terms of integrating initiatives and propositions from the third sector as part of the way that we deliver our client work, so it can be more impact-led and outcome-focused.
It's really interesting. Paul, you mentioned optimism, and Piumi mentioned purpose. I'd be interested to hear a bit more around what it is that inspired you to take these ideas and really run with them and create something meaningful.
Well, I mean, you know, what I'm doing right now, I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Conduit, and if you go back to the kind of origin story of my life of South Africa, one of the kind of principal philosophical things that Mandela and Tutu taught us is this idea of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an African philosophy which loosely translates into I am because we are. And it sort of stipulates that we as humans are better, more effective, more creative, more entrepreneurial, kinder, happier, more resilient, more generous when we recognize our interconnectedness and when we recognize the ties that we have towards each other. And if you think of it for a moment, I mean, Deloitte's a massive firm. It's really a myth to say that any given individual can make massive systematic change or accomplish large things. Any individual working in concert with a range of other people and leading can do an enormous amount. And if you think about all the challenges that we face today, they all require some degree of collaboration and they all require some degree of system change. And you aren't going to do that unless you have an ability to network and to connect. And so what we try to do at The Conduit is engineer serendipity, try to find ways of getting people to encounter each other on a regular basis and find out what their connections are. And then through work that we do on our solutions agenda, set out a set of things that we want to accomplish by connecting people together. And in those connections, it's the most inspirational thing that I've seen in a very long time, because you see people going, well, I can help you with that, and I can introduce you to that person, and well, you're trying to measure impact, but I've got finance, and I'm trying to build something, and I can do that, but I need somebody to help me do the legal documents. And all of a sudden, that interconnectedness can help you in a much quicker way achieve systematic change. And that's like, if I think we have a superpower, and I think if there's a superpower in the world, is to produce a forum and an interconnected body that can convene, that can bring people together around difficult challenges. And then you don't have the wisdom, you don't have the monopoly on truth. You say, let's collectively try and figure out what these solutions are.
It's really interesting because just listening to you there, you mentioned, this ability to bring people together, and obviously we are facing a world with it feels like an increasing number of challenges, existential challenges like climate change, for example. But it also feels like there's never been a point in time where we're better enabled to connect and to respond. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but would you say that that was true?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to choose any moment in history from the perspective of rapid technological change, capable of solving the largest problems that humanity faces, you would pick right this very moment, right? We're in this remarkable transformational moment, and you can either kind of get yourself into an existential crouch and say, I'm really worried about AI and the killer robots are coming to get us and we're going to lose our jobs and somebody's going to release some kind of terrible toxin and the world's going to come to an end. All of which are not non-negligible risks. Or you can say, exactly your point. We have these remarkable abilities to connect to each other, to share information, to make progress, to do vaccine discovery, not in 20 years, but in 6 months, to do molecular biology and material science in remarkable speed, to optimize our grids, to save electricity, to create fission and fusion. So you have all of these moments of both collaboration and breakthrough and innovation. And technology will probably get us a third of the way there. But the soft stuff that we as humans have to do around that tech, that we have to collaborate, we have to create social structures, we have to distribute the benefits fairly, we have to subject that to careful and thoughtful governance. All of that stuff is harder, but absolutely indispensable.
Piumi, you've done some amazing work in social value and been instrumental to how Deloitte delivers it, and you lead our partnerships approach. Why do you think it's been so important for us to collaborate and partner? Would you say it's similar to what Paul said in terms of better kind of entrepreneurialism, collaboration, delivery, or what else is there that you've seen benefit from collaboration and partnership?
So I think it's complex, as Paul's alluded to already. I think from a business firm perspective, our people really crave that in terms of that social impact element of what we stand for as a business. And I think as a firm, what we've been really strong at is really engaging and inspiring our people, thinking about how do we connect partnerships, so our fundraising and volunteering strategy, and kind of leverage the skill sets of our people so that actually they can feel purposeful not only with their client work, but also leveraging their skills to support the third sector. So I think that element is really key. I think there's also a massive part about it makes business sense to kind of work in partnership, to Paul's point, around that piece around collaboration, because actually if you find that common purpose, purpose really does overcome power. So it's not about who's in charge, who's going to get the glory, but it's about finding that piece which is mutually beneficial, how you can collaborate, how you can bring together expertise, skills, experience in a really meaningful way to harness something for the better. So if I'm just thinking about some recent examples, at the moment we're working with the Department for Science and Innovation Technology through a collaboration with also Good Things Foundation, who are the National Digital Inclusion Charity, as well as Vodafone. And this is all about creating a national device donation campaign. So we've thought about that we have as a firm a laptop donation scheme, which has been successful for the last 4 or 5 years. But actually, we can be greater than the sum of our parts here, and actually to really mobilise and kind of empower all organisations to think about their laptops and all other kind of hardware and kind of refurbishing those. We can collaborate with other providers and also have that endorsement with government. So that's an example of how we've been collaborating for greater impact, I would say.
Moving on to the Conduit, which you founded a number of years ago now, can you tell us a bit more about how it equips people to share ideas and create resolutions, and importantly, also drive them to action?
Well, maybe I'll give you a concrete example. So we have a range of partnerships with remarkable organizations, and we have a partnership with the National Trust. National Trust is the largest aggregate landowner in the United Kingdom, and it has custody over large swathes of land and over kind of heritage properties that it holds in perpetuity for future generations. And during one of the dinners that we facilitated for the leadership of the National Trust, we heard a story of them building out a wetland. And the story of the wetland was kind of remarkable because lots of people try to think of this kind of holy grail of nature as an asset class. How do you go about defending nature, and how do you go about allocating capital to nature and appropriately valuing nature when it's been so exploited and despoiled and degraded? And so they told this wonderful story of having created a wetland. And having created the wetland, a couple of remarkable and magical things started happening. The water quality improved, carbon was being sequestrated, biodiversity gain was occurring, more species were emerging, amphibians, bird life, small mammals in these particular wetlands. And grandparents and parents and children could come to these wetlands and experience biophilia, the love of nature and these beautiful sites that people could go and visit. And so it occurred to us that why are we just doing this sort of one at a time? Because if these things have all these magical properties, how might you go about scaling the development of wetlands? And then a sort of penny dropped because our kind of host said, and by the way, the other thing about these wetlands is downstream, the flooding stops. And so suddenly a light bulb went off in our heads saying, if they can do all these remarkable climate co-benefits, but they can also be part of this remarkable solution. 1 in 8 homes in the UK are at risk of flooding. That's soon to go to 1 in 4 if we're on our current trajectories. Floods are to the UK what fires are to the US and to LA. And floods really, pose a systemic risk to the United Kingdom. And insurers are the kind of canary in the coal mine here because they are withdrawing from markets across the world as climate risks are becoming increasingly uninsurable. So wetlands can be this remarkable bulwark against flooding. And so one of the things we've now done at The Conduit is assemble this really fantastic coalition. And we've called the coalition Reflood, which is a slight play on words because the national reinsurer on flooding is called Flood Re. And it's about seeking to reflood places. And the Dutch have reflooded places over the last couple centuries as an effort to stave off the existential risk of rising waters. And the attempt is to say, if we can locate wetlands in places that could protect downstream communities, then you could save billions of pounds of damages because the wetlands will stop flooding, but you can also create these remarkable sites of nature as an asset class. You could begin to harness the climate co-benefits, and you could mobilize a coalition of the National Trust, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the Crown Estate, the Church of England, forestry, defense, and then you can have major insurance companies and major banks and consulting firms and service providers in a coalition, which we've now assembled, and that coalition will then help deliver things at scale. And if you go back to where I started, if you were to thinking about how you would build out 1,000 wetlands across the UK and start doing it at a unit of 1 all on your own and have to assemble a coalition of people to deliver them ab initio each time in Plymouth and Somerset and Bath and Aberdeen, and that's difficult. Yeah. But if you have a network put together and you say, I'll do this, I'll do that, and do it in a more systematic and structured way, you can deliver social benefit, you can deliver economic benefit, and it happens through Ubuntu. It happens through collaboration and through networking.
What a wonderful story.
Yeah, and a great example of a real life imminent challenge being addressed by kind of convening and coalition. I think is great. Piumi, in your experience in terms of our social impact strategy, how have you seen some big challenges being addressed? I'm just thinking the social impact landscape has changed so much, the challenges are always adapting. How have you found solutions for convening and coming together to really address some of those challenges?
So I think we've needed to adapt in the same way that the landscape has changed. So I think if we think about our social impact partners, they have gone through a journey themselves. So if you think about the funding that's made available for the third sector from government, those funding mechanisms are kind of drying up or kind of more hard to come by. So with that comes this real need for charities and other third sector organisations to kind of continue to support their beneficiary groups more than ever, but actually finding themselves in a tricky spot in terms of funding. So I think where we have been able to support is to kind of adapt in terms of how we can support the third sector, build operational and financial resilience. So yes, the fundraising is really important and we continued to contribute as much as we can to our local office partners, but also this piece around supporting charities understand that actually there's an opportunity to build a sustainable pipeline of commercial services, thinking around what they already offer and commercialising those services, partnering with us so we can integrate their initiatives as part of our client work and deliver not only kind of improved outcomes for wider society, but also improved outcomes for themselves as well. So I think this piece around mutually beneficial solutions is really key, and being adaptable. And I'll be honest, there are some organisations who we partner with who are slower on the uptake in terms of kind of recognising that opportunity and also kind of being more core to the traditional value set of a charity. But I've seen that as a real opportunity for us to support, kind of build understanding, awareness, and also kind of to share the opportunities and to demonstrate and evidence the business case as it stands.
It is quite bold, I think, and innovative to go beyond that traditional quote-unquote charitable or philanthropic partnership that so many organisations are more kind of comfortable with. It's an easy win. It doesn't necessarily require a lot of time investment. How have you found kind of getting people on board to realise that new idea? Because it is quite a bold, innovative way of partnering, I would say, particularly with third sector and even the public sector as well.
No, definitely. So kind of to bring it to life, one organisation who we've done a lot of work with and have a relationship over 10 years is DebateMate. So they run after-school debating programmes up and down the country for primary and secondary school children in areas of high deprivation. It's all about building confidence and kind of career skills so that the kind of employability piece is stronger. And so originally when we partnered with a DebateMate, it was around volunteering, so our people kind of acting as mentors for students when they would be kind of working through a particular topic, kind of presenting and pitching, so a great volunteering opportunity. We've then progressed to kind of recognise that they then developed a communication and leadership set of courses that actually we could integrate as part of our offering for our people to support a kind of communication and leadership style, which is different, kind of using the medium of debate. That's been really effective. Then we progressed to work with them to develop a kind of paid-for volunteering kind of offering, which then we can position as part of bids, and in particular demographics or regions where the greatest need is present. So I think that in itself demonstrates a kind of adaptability and flexibility to kind of drive greater outcomes, but also really importantly supporting core beneficiary groups. Because to Paul's point earlier, the future talent pipeline of this country is dependent on young people. And actually, as a large corporate, we have a huge role to play. And there's a huge opportunity. We have 25,000 individuals who work here at Deloitte. They have a huge array of skills, expertise, which can be harnessed in different ways. That said, there's a huge amount for us to learn from third sector organisations here as well, in terms of how to kind of collaborate, how to convene, come together with that mutual benefit.
Looking for a way to make a difference while you shop? Well, with Scope, you can. Scope is one of the national charities Deloitte supports as part of our social impact programme, 5 Million Futures. Visiting any of Scope's retail stores or online shop helps to support their work to create an equal future for disabled people. Every pre-loved item purchased or donated funds Scope's vital services and helps keep millions of items out of landfills. It's good for people and it's good for the planet. Just visit scope.org.uk to find out more. Paul, I'm sure the collaboration obviously is wonderful, but it doesn't always go smoothly, and people have conflicting ideas and theories. How do you overcome that sort of challenge when it arises and any setbacks that come your way?
I think you're completely correct. I think one of the incredibly dangerous and corrosive things around the way our information markets work is that 50 years ago, you had a couple of newspapers, they may have a slant this way or the other. You went down to the newsstand, you picked them up and you read them, but they were sort of 3 or 4 broad sources of truth, and the kind of facts were still broadly shared amongst those entities. We're now in a world where we're so micro-targeted and we receive our information along kind of echo chambers which reinforce our own views and don't expose us to other views. And you see that fragmentation and polarization in our politics and in our society. And there's some really, really scary statistics out there about people saying they wouldn't help a person who'd been knocked down on the street if they had a different political view. So you get this very alarming fragmentation that's emerging, and you see it in our politics. So I think what you've got to do is make a very conscious effort to say, how do you find areas around which people can collaborate if they are now in these sort of echo chambers or in the silos? And I think, climate is actually one of those areas where there are these incredibly fertile venues for opportunity. So I don't mind if you're left or right or Republican or Democrat or Tory or Labour or Green or Liberal Democrat, but you don't want dirty air for your child. The evidence is clear. It inhibits their learning. It's bad for their longevity. You don't want dirty air for your grandfather and your grandmother either. We don't want extreme heat. We don't want to be flooded out of our homes. We don't want mass food producers to put effluent into our rivers so that they become toxic and they become public health concerns. And then if you turn that around, there are really simple, pragmatic, common sense solutions in each of these areas that you can unite people around, which involve the third sector, charities, civil society, business, government. And again, it requires people to say, let's have a clear-eyed view on the solution, and then let's orchestrate people to try and figure out what's the best policy, what's the best financing mechanism, what's the role of NGOs, what's the role of business, what's the role of local government. We're doing a big conference with the Wellcome Trust to kick off London Climate Action Week on the intersection between public health and climate. And one of the things that people are very, very concerned about is the rise of antibiotic-resistant superbugs. There is a non-negligible chance that one of these has a breakout event. And if there is a breakout event for one of these superbugs, it will make COVID and pandemics seem like a tea party. So what you need is a very interesting collaboration between the world's great philanthropies who will accelerate and fund research, big pharma who will get behind it if they are somewhat de-risked, government to create an enabling policy setting, and then a set of the kind of tech-enabled, what Google has been doing through DeepMind to be able to think about how you use protein folding and molecular biology to get ahead of this. You can solve this stuff if you set your mind to it, show a bit of leadership, and then promote collaboration. And so if I'm hopeful in the world right now, I think that there is a solution for most of the challenges we confront. And those are always multi-stakeholder, and they all require leadership, and they all require technology. We have all of those things. If we didn't have those things, it would be alarming, but we do. And so the only thing that lies in the way of progress is acting.
Yes, doing.
Getting up and doing it.
Moving on slightly, although related to what you were saying, Lizzie, around kind of debate and conflict, one of the other barriers that I think exists to actioning an idea is when there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm and real energy and passion about a particular topic. How do you harness that in a really positive way and bring the best kind of skills and energy and passion from people to really transfer all the great ideas people have into the actual doing? Do you have any kind of examples or kind of tangible tips that you can give around how you really do harness that energy to delivery?
I can say one, but I'm sure to my immediate left there are loads. So I would say one of the first organizations we met at The Conduit was an organization called RefuAid. And think about for a moment what happens when a refugee arrives in a country and they have a remarkable skills. So they're a Syrian doctor. They arrive in the UK and they don't have the right to work and they don't have the right skills to be able to practice. So they spend 3 or 4 years, if they get the right to work, driving an Uber in order to save money, in order to requalify. That's an enormous waste of human potential and talent. So what RefuAid does is provide refugees with loans to enable them to requalify rapidly so they don't have to be an Uber driver for 4 years squandering their skills in order to requalify. And so a person arrives as a refugee. Now, large, complex, polarizing question out in the world, let's just stipulate it. But I think most people would say that if a Syrian doctor arrives on your shores, you probably want them doing brain surgery rather than Uber driving. And what a small loan to them can do is allow that human capital to fulfill its true potential. But also, if you give them a loan, they can repay that loan because they go from earning £25,000 a year to earning the wage of a well-qualified doctor. And if they repay that loan can be used to enable other people to accelerate their ability to work and to make use of their full potential. Well, there's a metaphor there about like what we should be doing with human potential, right? We shouldn't be squandering it, and we should be allowing people, regardless of where they come from, to fulfill their potential and to make a contribution. And there's a kind of small c conservative idea there that people should work hard and take responsibility and make a commitment to their communities. I bet you could produce a lot of consensus, or more than you would think, about the need to finance this and provide that assistance in an area that is a big touch paper, right? It's very controversial. Refugees and migration are something that is really poisoning our politics. But if you kind of paused for a moment and thought about what a reasonable, rational, sensible thing to do would be, you'd probably do something like RefuAid is doing. And again, therein lies my sort of deep conviction that when we're solutions-oriented, when we're optimistic, when we think of the best of us rather than the worst of us, we can actually do good things.
Piumi, can you tell us a little bit more about Deloitte's social impact strategy, which has grown and evolved so much over the years and started with an idea? When you kind of have an innovative or bold idea about a particular partnership, what's the first step that you take to kind of transform it from an idea into deliverable impact?
So I think from the perspective of Deloitte's social impact strategy, it's very much around kind of aligning to multiple priorities. So one is certainly around engaging and inspiring our people. We do that through our local office charity partnerships. The other is around driving commercial outcomes, and this will be around how do we deliver the best client service to our clients in terms of the products and the services. How do we design those products and services? So for example, if you think about from a social impact lens, are we making sure that the products are designed with an inclusive lens? So the content is accessible for all. So in that respect, more recently, we've actually started collaborating with a number of partners. For example, Thomas Pocklington Trust, who work with those that are visually impaired to integrate kind of a set of interviews as part of designing a new banking app, for example, where we would kind of critique and assess how accessible this banking app is, because ultimately there are over 2 billion people worldwide at least who are visually impaired. And if a banking app is not going to be accessible for that population, then actually from a client service point of view, we're not delivering the optimal outcome for our client. So there's that whole commercial piece. Then there's a systemic change part. So what is it as a firm that we want to be kind of driving the agenda on and kind of have agency in as well? So I touched on previously around the Department for Science and Innovation Technology collaboration with Vodafone and Good Things Foundation. And that's very much around scaling our laptop donation scheme to collaborate and bring together a national device donation campaign. I think another example to share is around the whole topic around AI. Love it or hate it, AI is here to stay. And at the firm, we have our own internal generative AI platform called Paired. We took a decision last year to gift Paired to Scope, who are one of our national inclusion partners. So Scope is a national disability charity. And the reason for this was around really wanting to understand the barriers for the disabled community when using Paired, so that we could integrate and make sure that our kind of internal platform is as inclusive as possible, but also to give Scope the opportunity from their staff perspective to see the value and the benefits of optimising AI for their own purposes. That pilot's been really successful, and actually at the moment we're looking to gift Paired to at least 2,000 service users of Scope. So I think that's a great example of kind of taking an idea and thinking kind of more laterally around how do you apply a social impact lens and think about optimising the outcomes that can be driven through a pilot, and then kind of taking that forward to a kind of more scaled approach.
Ensuring that idea benefits as many people as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Brilliant.
What an inspiring conversation it's been. We have to start wrapping up, unfortunately. So, Paul, coming to you first, what's your advice to people who have a bright idea, but they don't know where to start? How do they take the next step?
I think the first piece of advice would be take the step.
To your point about just do it.
Yeah, because I think one of the things is that it's a kind of metaphor for doing good in the world, for entrepreneurship, for anybody who's ever built anything or created things. We're much more fearful about starting on something than we ought to be, right? So I think firstly, you have to create a society and a world which permits failure, which encourages people to take risks and then enables that, right? I think one of the things that we've got to get much better at is saying to people, what are the skills and the networks and the environments that you need in order for you to take that step and then not feel as though you were a mug for having taken the step, right? And the first thing I would say is try and take that step where you've maximized Ubuntu. You've found a cohort of people who will come along with you and seek their advice actively. You know, I think listening, taking feedback in real time, adjusting, learning, being curious are all of the kind of qualities which both entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, you know, yourselves included, inside a very large corporation who are seeking to both do good but also be catalytic to create value. Those are the things that you want to do. And so my first advice is take a step. The second one is be curious. Third one is network like crazy, because networking can be kind of instrumental and seem sort of off. But networking is really what it is about being reciprocal, because if you build a network, you can also give into that network, and you can also help people out, and you can also barter and be generous. I think, you know, the most successful societies in the world, bar none, are ones in which people trust each other and connect with each other in ways that minimize friction. And I'll conclude on this one, which is, I often do this sort of thought experiment for myself, but for others, which is think about the moment in your life that you had your highest levels of happiness, and pick 2 or 3 moments, close your eyes and visualize what they were. And I will bet you that in the overwhelming majority of instances, you were not alone. You were in the company of others. And that tells you something about the human condition, right? We want to be in the company of others. And we do good things when we're in the company of others. And we're more sad and atomized and dangerous when we sit on our own. Building that sense of community is a really important part of the human condition. And so celebrate it and put yourself in community.
Brilliant. Piumi, what about you?
I think for me, kind of 2 reflections. The first would be figure out the so what. What is it you're trying to solve for? And be really clear upon that. Who are you trying to solve for as well? Does your idea actually support a particular community group? And have you figured out that it's actually what they want? I think that's really key at the start, because you might think you've got a great idea. Have you stress tested it? Do you know it's the right idea? Would be my first piece of advice. The second then would be around what's the jeopardy? So if we don't follow on your idea, what's going to happen? And I think that's often quite a key piece to unlock when you're trying to galvanise interest, engagement, support and endorsement, is to really demonstrate what the jeopardy is if we don't follow through with an idea. So those would be my couple of reflections.
Brilliant. Great advice. Thank you both so much. Final question to wrap up the episode. We bring it back to the big question of the day. In 1 sentence, if you can. It is hard.
We sometimes allow up to 3,
yes.
don't we?
How do we turn words into action?
I think you turn words into action by being clear on the solution you're trying to achieve, and then being systematic in building a collection of people to help execute that solution.
Brilliant.
Great answer.
That's what I would have said as
Great,
well.
great, perfect. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Thank you.
Great pleasure.
Great. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Green Room by Deloitte. We release a new episode every other Tuesday with another big question, so don't forget to hit follow or subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening or watching. That way, you'll be alerted whenever a new episode drops. This podcast is produced by our very own Pod Squad, original music by Ali Barrett.